Hello everyone! I'm doing something different today. Last week, as I was trying to decide what to review next, I was looking over my lists of possibilities, which are multitudinous, and there wasn't anything I felt like doing right now. And then I remembered this other project I had been working on. It's not finished, but I realized that I could use what I had so far and break it up into sections, which might actually be better. So today, I am sharing my thoughts on the first 12 episodes of Star Trek: The Original Series. A quick bit of background, if you're thinking, didn't she already do this? I did do a video on this show once years ago. It was an overview, and I shared my thoughts on a couple of my favorite episodes. But at that time, I had seen many episodes, but not all of them. So I wanted to go through the whole thing properly, start to finish, and talk about the show on an episode-by-episode basis. The original series is my favorite Star Trek show. I know that puts me in the minority, but if you know me and you're familiar with my old-timey taste, it figures. The primary reason I prefer it is that I love the characters, the interactions between them, the banter, the friction, all of it. And that carries into the movies as well. The 6 films with the original cast is my favorite movie series. And I do mean all 6. Okay, let's get into it. Season 1, Episode 1, The Man Trap. On a routine checkup mission, Captain Kirk and Dr. McCoy encounter an old flame of the Doctor's who he thinks hasn't aged a day. But that's not what Kirk sees, and when one of his crew members turns up dead, he suspects the couple living on the planet of some deceit. This wasn't the first episode filmed, but it was the first to be televised on September 8th, 1966, and it's a great start, kicking off the series with a combination murder mystery and creature feature. It introduces the Monster of the Week model, which has been emulated in many other series. I personally love Monster of the Week episodes. The Salt Vampire, being the first Star Trek monster we encounter, is iconic, and it's genuinely freaky looking, the first of many great designs by prop and monster maker Hua Chang. The episode also does a good job establishing the 3 main characters of the show, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and how they operate. There's not so much about the dynamics between them, but this was early on. They would develop more of that later as they went. Season 1, Episode 2, Charlie X. An adolescent who has survived on his own since he was 3 is brought aboard the Enterprise. The crew tries to be friendly and help him acclimate to proper human interactions, unaware that he has tremendous power. Charlie is played by Robert Walker Jr., who I think looks a lot like his dad, except when he makes this face. The first half of the episode has some fun moments, including a Spock and Uhura jam session in the rec room, Kirk and Spock playing 3-dimensional chess, Kirk fumbling his attempts to give fatherly advice. These scenes may trick you into believing this is a lighthearted story, but then it takes a dark turn, especially when Charlie's crush on Yeoman Rand develops into a dangerous obsession. Every time I see Yeoman Rand, I am distracted by her basket weave hairstyle, but her plight here is terrifying. It's interesting that Star Trek tackled a topic that is particularly relatable to women so early in its run, despite women not being considered its target audience, or the target audience for any science fiction. This disturbing and effective episode was the first of 11 written by fan favorite DC Fontana. The DC being short for Dorothy Catherine. Season 1, Episode 3, Where No Man Has Gone Before. When the Enterprise drives through a force field, 2 of its crew are mysteriously struck and develop godlike powers. Gary Lockwood guest stars as Gary Mitchell, Kirk's friend and helmsman, who transforms into an unstoppable force, and Sally Kellerman plays the psychiatrist investigating his case. This was the second series pilot after The Cage, filmed before episodes 1 and 2, and it's a little odd in terms of personnel. Scott and Sulu are introduced, but there's no McCoy and no Uhura, and they haven't quite gotten Spock right yet. The eyebrows extend too high, he smiles a little too often, and for some reason, on the bridge, He shouts when everyone else speaks at a regular volume. Still, though costumes and other details were in the tryout phase, it's a good episode. It's creepy, challenging, and philosophical. Right out of the gate, Star Trek was asking the big questions, and here it's concerned with what makes a god, what man's relation must be to a superior being, what responsibility that being has to show compassion and mercy, etc. The eerie, silvery eyes were achieved by putting a layer of wrinkled tinfoil in between special contact lenses. Maybe it was perfectly safe, but I would never be willing to try that. Season 1, Episode 4, The Naked Time. When the Enterprise sends a team to investigate what killed the crew on a dying planet, a virus is accidentally brought back aboard, which breaks down its victims' inhibitions, leading to chaos on the ship. So many things happen in this episode. This is the one where a maniacal Sulu runs around threatening people with a rapier. Nurse Chapel, played by Gene Roddenberry's wife Majel Barrett, makes a confession to Spock. Spock gets the bug, and the onslaught of emotions from his human side causes a breakdown. He and Kirk smack the heck out of each other. We find out just how Kirk feels about the Enterprise, and Spock and Scotty uncover a formula to accomplish time travel. I feel like that one was maybe just a step too far. Like, that on top of everything else? Okay. What I find especially enjoyable is that there are so many little funny moments in the midst of this deadly serious situation. The insubordinate Irish navigator who takes over and won't stop singing over the intercom is hilarious, and I also enjoy seeing everyone dashing around the corridors, covering abandoned posts, and working like mad to avert disaster. It is the first kind of campy episode, but I have a really good time with it. Season 1, Episode 5, The Enemy Within. A transporter malfunction causes Kirk to return to the Enterprise, split into two separate individuals, Good Kirk and Bad Kirk. This one's more psychological and asks some questions about what makes a captain a good leader, while giving William Shatner a chance to ham it up. Now, I know some people would say that's what Shatner was always doing. I disagree, and I find that a gross oversimplification. But yeah, he has his moments. I think he does a nice job portraying Good Kirk, whose weak, indecisive character actually makes him ineffectual as the captain of the Enterprise. Without any element of inner darkness, he has no force of will, no strength of self-control. And Bad Kirk is just a cranky jerk who's only looking out for himself. It makes for a fascinating study. I really like Captain Kirk. I admire his leadership qualities as demonstrated throughout the series and the films, so it's interesting to see those qualities dissected, and so early in the first season when one could argue that the character hasn't been fully established yet. The conclusion we reach is that Kirk is flawed, but those flaws make him a better, stronger captain. He said it himself in Star Trek V. He needs his pain. The episode was written by acclaimed sci-fi novelist Richard Matheson, who had previously written a few episodes of The Twilight Zone, notably Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which Shatner starred in. Matheson did not like the B-plot that Roddenberry added, where some members are freezing on a planet below, but I found it a compelling enough sub-story. There's also a harrowing moment where evil Kirk attacks poor Yeoman Rand, who at this point can't catch a break. And I don't think it was nice of Spock to tease her at the end. Season 1, Episode 6, Mudd's Women. After the pursuit of an evasive and erratic ship leads to its destruction, Kirk beams aboard its occupants, a slick Irishman and his cargo, three beautiful women who cast a hypnotic spell over the men of the Enterprise. This is the first of two appearances fraudster Harry Mudd made on the original series. He also came back for appearances on some later shows. I'd say this is one of the first truly silly episodes, in the first half at least. But the situation does lead to some very funny Spock reactions. There's also an awkward conversation between Kirk and McCoy where they're stumbling over the question of just what these ladies are. However, there is something more sobering going on. And it takes another serious turn when the women are presented to a trio of coarse miners on a harsh planet, and we finally get the hard-hitting questions. Where does true beauty come from? And is what a man wants in a wife the same as what he needs? Season 1, Episode 7, What Are Little Girls Made Of? Nurse Chapel's fiancé makes contact years after he moved his experiments underground and disappeared. She and Kirk beam down to meet him and are disturbed by the sinister direction his experiments with androids have taken. I find this one kind of dull. It's my least favorite of this batch. It does have some interesting sets, and it's different that Nurse Chapel is featured, but I missed the other characters and their witty repartee, and most of the time it was just too slow-moving. But you do have Rock, the tall android, who is very spooky. His ability to mimic anyone is a nice touch, especially in contrast with the actor's deep voice. Rock is played by Ted Cassidy, who was 6'9". He's most famous for playing Lurch on The Addams Family, but on Star Trek he was also the voice of the Gorn in Arena and the voice of Baylock in the Corbomite Maneuver. I gotta say though, what is with the fabric of his outfit? It's like a baby blanket or an old lady's nightgown. I found it so distracting, and it took away from his intimidation factor. Season 1, Episode 8, Miri. A landing party beams down to a duplicate Earth where they discover a 1960-esque wasteland inhabited only by a group of wild, elusive children. I liked this one much more than the last two. There's a lot going on, an experiment gone wrong, an infectious virus, feral kids. Kim Darby guest stars as Miri, a girl they find who is willing to communicate with them, especially after she takes a liking to Kirk. He turns on the charm, and you can find it creepy if you want to, but I just see it as a tactic. I recognize why he's interacting with her this way. This is also a good episode showing how Starfleet officers operate and interact in a hostile environment. When they're attacked by a stranger in the street, Kirk punches him to subdue him, but then when he and McCoy recognize the creature's childlike nature, they offer words of comfort and a soothing touch. I also appreciate the quiet, intelligent way the landing party discusses their increasingly dire situation. These are demonstrations of their benevolence, their peaceful methods, and their calm but intellectual communication style. Something that I've heard is lacking in all the newer Star Trek stuff. This isn't an action-heavy story, but it is a good drama, and the premise is kind of like Lord of the Flies meets The Girl Who Owned a City by O.T. Nelson. That book was published in 1975. Season 1, Episode 9, Dagger of the Mind. A homicidal maniac seems to have boarded the Enterprise in a material exchange with a penal colony. However, as more information comes in, Dr. McCoy suspects something more sinister afoot. This has some strong performances, great staging and camera work, and I appreciate how they were able to fill these episodes with so much content. We have an intense initial premise that gives way to a deeper science fiction concept, leading to intriguing and smart discussions, and then there are strange side characters, and Kirk beams down to the colony with Dr. Helen Noel, a pretty medlab technician that he had a fling with at a Christmas party, which is an amusing pickle that turns into a relevant subplot. I liked her, I liked how she handled herself, and in addition to all this, there's still time for some arguing and ribbing among the three amigos, which is almost always my favorite thing. Now, on the whole, I did find this one kind of forgettable, but it's not bad. Season 1, Episode 10, The Corbomite Maneuver. Kirk is confronted by a strange cube that won't let the Enterprise pass, while also contending with Mr. Bailey, a hot-headed navigator with a chip on his shoulder. This one's got some great lines. I love McCoy's, "If I jumped every time a light came on around here, I'd end up talking to myself," which he mutters to himself. Have I mentioned that Dr. McCoy is my favorite? And then there's Spock asking Kirk, has it occurred to you that there's a certain inefficiency in constantly questioning me on things you've already made up your mind about? And Kirk, with a smile, answers, it gives me emotional security. The turning point comes when a disembodied voice starts threatening them. Now, if you've seen the episode before, and I've seen it a few times, I feel like, you realize some of the things it's saying are actually pretty funny. But the first time, it's alarming. Then they obtain a visual and see this incredibly creepy alien, another Hua-Chang creation. But in the end, Baylock is revealed to be a winsome little baby man, played by Clint Howard of all people. He's got a grown man's voice and a hearty laugh, and it turns out he was just testing them because he was lonely and wants someone to teach him about Earth. It's one of the weirder twist endings, a surprisingly amusing conclusion that follows a lot of tension. There was even friction between Kirk and McCoy, leading to a momentary blow-up. I like Kirk's clever poker bluff, followed by everyone pulling themselves together. If they're all about to die, they'll do so heroically with their boots on. The episode was directed by Joseph Sargent, who later directed two of my favorite 70s movies, Colossus the Forbin Project and The Taking of Pelham 123. Season 1, Episodes 11 and 12, The Menagerie, Parts 1 and 2. The Enterprise responds to a call from Captain Christopher Pike, redirecting them to a starbase, but when they beam down, Kirk finds Pike an invalid in a wheelchair, incapable of sending such a message. Meanwhile, Spock commandeers the Enterprise to take it to Talos 4, a forbidden planet that's been visited only once by the Enterprise under Pike's command. It is strange to see Spock acting clandestinely and illegally and against his friend, and it's also strange but fair that when Kirk voices his suspicion of Spock, it's Dr. McCoy who fervently argues that Spock would be incapable of such deceit. And then it's left to McCoy to arrest Spock for mutiny, an order that doesn't sit well with him. Everything is topsy-turvy. It then becomes a court-martial episode, and when Spock introduces video from the Enterprise's first visit to Talos 4 13 years ago as his evidence, they roll footage from The Cage, which was shot in 1964 as the first Star Trek pilot, rejected and unaired, starring Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Pike. I love Shatner's Captain Kirk, and I think he was the perfect fit for the show as it came to be, but Jeffrey Hunter is one of my favorites, and when I think about The Cage, there is a part of me that wonders about what might have been. Explanations for what happened vary, and we'll probably never get the full story because Jeffrey Hunter passed away in 1969. But the common consensus is that they wanted to keep him, but he was reluctant to commit to a weekly science fiction television series that he didn't have faith would succeed. Also, his wife kept making aggressive demands, which did not help the situation. It soured the relationship, so he left, a new captain was created, and William Shatner was cast, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But it's always a pleasure to watch Jeffrey Hunter. His Pike is a serious captain, but restless, tired of the heavy responsibility that comes with command of a starship. This state of mind, and his being a perfect specimen, their words, not mine, although I do agree, make him susceptible prey to the aliens of Talos 4, who take him captive. I appreciate that they found a way to recycle this unaired footage instead of just tossing it out. We get to see Majel Barrett as number 1, John Hoyt plays the medical officer, and he's fine, though he's no DeForest Kelley. What's really uncanny is the two versions of Spock. The early Spock, from before they figured out what a Vulcan should be like, I guess, is too expressive. He's got these bushy eyebrows and a big smile. He's not the cool cucumber we're used to. In fact, he's kind of a dork. The Menagerie is the series' only two-parter, and the bulk of Part 2 is footage from The Cage, with Captain Pike meeting his captors. The telepathic Talosians invade your mind and use your memories and thoughts to keep you suspended in a dream world, or to punish you if you don't obey them. They offer him a woman called Vina, played by Susan Oliver, who can appear in any guise he'll find most desirable, but Pike doggedly resists her temptations. I've always found it frustrating that one of the go-to jokes about Captain Kirk is that he loves those green women. I think this idea comes from Vina's recurring appearance in the end credits as the sexy Orion slave girl. But real ones know that was Pike's fantasy, not Kirk's. And the only other green woman doesn't show up until season 3. I find the Telosians some of the most repellent aliens in the series. I hate their giant butt-shaped heads with the pulsating veins. The one in charge is especially off-putting and cruel and kind of irritating. This character, called the Keeper, was played on screen by actress Meg Wiley, and then for extra disorientation, the character was voiced by Malachi Throne, who incidentally came back to play the Commodore of the Starbase who's leading the court-martial. I think The Cage on its own was a good, compelling sci-fi story with strong lead performances, but I also like the way it was incorporated into the main series, and this outcome for Captain Pike is more satisfying. I'm going to end this one here. I hope you enjoyed the video. Unfortunately, I watched these episodes very sporadically, so I have no idea when I'll be able to post the next batch. I could give you an estimate, but I don't want to make a promise that I can't keep. So I would say don't hold your breath, but do let me know what you think of these episodes in the comments below, and I'll be back next Saturday with a new video. Thanks for watching.